The Intel campus at Ronler Acres supports roughly 15,000 well-paying jobs on its power load. Portland General Electric recently committed 430 megawatts to 5 data center customers, enough electricity to run 2 more campuses that size, and the long-term job count attached to those facilities is fewer than 300. That is what a substitution looks like before it has fully arrived. Hillsboro is the heart of what Oregon calls the Silicon Forest, the regional tech corridor that grew around Intel's decision to plant a chip fabrication hub in Washington County in 1974. For 50 years, that cluster defined what semiconductor manufacturing looked like in the American West. What is replacing it now is not manufacturing. Intel's retreat from Oregon has not been clean or sudden. The company cut more than 25,000 positions globally between 2025 and 2026, with Hillsboro absorbing the largest share. As of December 2024, Intel still employed roughly 20,000 people in Oregon, nearly all of them in Washington County. The workforce has been declining in waves ever since. What those announcements do not answer is the question of what fills the space Intel contracts out of. The answer arriving in Hillsboro is not manufacturing. Data centers need land, power, and fiber. Semiconductor manufacturing, the way Hillsboro has practiced it for 50 years, needs researchers, fabrication engineers, and process technicians, along with the entire support operation that keeps a clean room facility running continuously. One high salary position in that environment produces 4 to 5 additional jobs in the surrounding area, which economists call the job multiplier effect. And in Hillsboro, it was never an abstraction. In a city where Intel's average Oregon employee was earning between $110,000 and $180,000 a year, well above the state median, that economic multiplier was the restaurant district, the contractor backlog, and a school district that grew to serve 20,000 students. Data centers need a handful of senior IT workers and a rotating security staff. The multiplier does not come with them. Think about what that means for a city built entirely on that multiplier. The rush to absorb Hillsboro's industrial land came in volume and quickly. By spring 2026, the city had processed dozens of enterprise zone applications from data center developers, a state program giving qualifying companies a temporary 100% property tax break on new investments. Then, in the weeks before Oregon's statewide moratorium took effect on June 6th, 17 more applications arrived. Among the companies racing that deadline, NVIDIA, CoreWeave, Adobe, Dropbox, QTS, and Flexential. According to the city of Hillsboro, all 50 approved enterprise zone agreements across 29 companies now represent more than $11.6 billion in total investment and approximately 3,200 jobs. Hold that number next to this one. Intel's direct and indirect employment in Oregon was measured at an estimated 125,000 livelihoods in 2019, per a Berkeley Business School analysis that used Hillsboro as a case study in how industrial clusters sustain regional employment. By 2025, the indirect footprint alone had contracted to approximately 75,000, a loss of 30,000 livelihoods in 6 years. The data centers processing applications for enterprise zone exemptions are not filling that gap. They are using the land and the tax program the gap left behind. But here is where it gets harder. According to the Hillsboro Herald, which obtained its information through public records requests and internal sources, PGE's power grid in Hillsboro is maxed out, not strained, maxed. Some data centers in the city have already finished construction and are being told to expect a 3 to 5 year wait before they can receive power. What the region is left with, in energy infrastructure terms, is something analysts in the utility sector have started calling stranded assets, power capacity and grid build-out committed to facilities that cannot yet use it, while the businesses that could use it are being turned away. The infrastructure Intel helped build over 5 decades is now fully committed to facilities that produce almost none of the employment Intel produced. Mayor Beach Pace disclosed at a recent community gathering that Hillsboro had already lost at least one prospective major employer because of this. A company from Japan had wanted to come. There was no power left to offer them. Now let that sit for a second. Intel's power consumption at Ronler Acres reflected what the campus was doing. Chips were coming out. Engineers were earning wages and spending them in the county. 4 high school buildings were filling up because the workforce to fill them existed. The 430 megawatts now committed to 5 data center customers does not carry that return. Per the Herald's April 2026 reporting, data centers in Hillsboro pay less than half of what the average resident pays per unit of electricity. Oregon utility watchdogs have documented that the cost of building new power infrastructure to meet data center demand is being transferred to residential ratepayers. The city has a real case to make in its own defense. Hillsboro officials say data centers account for roughly 1.8% of the city's annual water demand and have contributed to community projects including a community center, fire stations, and emergency vehicles. Some approvals, the city notes, revitalized vacant industrial properties that had been sitting empty since earlier rounds of tech contraction. Mayor Pace has stated publicly that state law required the city to approve qualifying enterprise zone applications. When those applications come in for enterprise zones, which is a form of tax abatement, Pace said on the city's official YouTube channel, "We have to approve them if those developers meet those requirements." The city was not positioned to refuse. On June 26, 2026, a coalition including 1,000 Friends of Oregon and the Oregon Education Association filed suit against Hillsboro and Washington County, seeking to reverse multiple enterprise zone approvals tied to NVIDIA, CoreWeave, Adobe, Dropbox, QTS, and Flexential. The plaintiffs argue city and county officials failed to follow required procedures, lacked sufficient evidence, and approved applications without proof the projects would significantly increase local employment. Hillsboro City Councilor Kipperlyn Sinclair is listed as a plaintiff. The Oregon Education Association is a party to that lawsuit because the same program being used to exempt data center equipment from property taxes is the one that redirected more than $1 billion away from Hillsboro schools and local services over the years of Intel's abatement, and the association is now arguing that the schools are being shorted again through the same mechanism, at a time when the jobs attached to the exemptions are a fraction of what Intel's jobs were, and with no employment multiplier following behind them to make up the difference. The 15,000 to 300 figure is not a forecast. It describes what has already been decided. The power, the land, most of the industrial zone capacity, it is already spoken for. Intel has not left. Gordon Moore Park still houses ASML's high NAEUV lithography machines, the only units of that type operating in the United States, the most advanced chip-making equipment in production anywhere on Earth right now. Intel's 14th generation process node is being developed on that campus, with risk production targeted for 2028. Intel is racing TSMC's N2 node for the next tier of high-volume manufacturing customers, and whether it can close that gap will determine whether a full-scale Silicon Forest semiconductor cluster still exists in another decade. The company is smaller in Oregon than it was and is not growing the way it grew between 1974 and 2019. What is growing is the server rack count and the electricity bills of the families living near them. The lawsuit challenging the enterprise zone approvals will move through the courts over the coming months. Intel has said publicly it cannot proceed to the 14th generation node without first landing a major external customer, and firm decisions on that are expected in the second half of 2026. One outcome settles whether the substitution was lawful. The other settles whether a version of the original industrial promise is still available. Neither answer has come in yet.